Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, county health officials hold a press conference to talk about the newly discovered presence of measles in Humboldt County and how people can protect themselves and their families. Also, Philip Zwerling from Change-Our-Name-Fort-Bragg joins us to talk about the slave master general who is the namesake of one local coastal community, something Zwerling and others would like to change. Coming up now on Headline Humboldt. From the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. We're surrounded on all sides by history. For the North Coast, that history includes more than 150 years of white culture that supplanted and nearly destroyed thousands upon thousands of years of Native tradition. One history is rife with extraction, domination, and the unequal distribution of power, while the other demonstrates how humans can better inhabit the world to which we all belong. Which history should we honor? What story are we trying to tell about ourselves? One effort in recent years has been to reconsider our collective history with an eye toward social justice and fair representation. For some, it's been a political movement, while opponents claim it's been an exercise in woke ideology. Several years ago, the California Legislative Black Caucus requested that the city of Fort Bragg change its name from that of Confederate General and slave owner Braxton Bragg to something that better reflects the nature and feeling of that community. The request kicked off a debate that continues to this day, one in which Governor Gavin Newsom has weighed in and agreed that the time has come to change the city's name. The City Council initially sent it to committee where it languished in deadlock, but the effort, while delayed, has not gone away. We'll speak with author and educator Phil Zwerling about the city's past, its future, and why he believes the name Fort Bragg has got to go. But first, the news. According to the County Department of Health and Human Services, its staff has been in contact with at least 115 people who were exposed to measles after an individual with the virus visited 2 Eureka locations late last week. They are asking that anyone who thinks they may have been exposed but has not been contacted to call 268-2182. Once again, that's 268-2182. Through interviews, vaccine records, and in some cases immunity testing, the majority of those who were known to be exposed are likely immune to measles. And 10 individuals were given the post-exposure prophylaxis vaccine, which can be given up to 72 hours after exposure. Folks who visited the Days Inn by Wyndham at 275th Street in Eureka from Thursday, May 9th at 2 p.m. through Friday, May 10th at 3 a.m. or Providence's St. Joseph Hospital's emergency room on Friday, May 10th between 2:30 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. may have been exposed to measles. If you were inside either of those locations during the times mentioned and have not been in contact with public health staff, please call, whether or not you are experiencing symptoms. A public health nurse will evaluate your possible exposure, help determine your immunity status, and provide additional information. Anyone who contracted the virus after last week's exposure would start to be contagious anywhere from early today through May 31st. If you think you may have measles, contact your primary care provider or public health. Do not physically go into a medical facility. The situation is made more complicated by the fact that most people today don't know their vaccination status, according to county officials.
Many people don't know their vaccine status anymore. They don't have their vaccines records readily available. However, the vast majority of individuals, we were able to actually trace their individual vaccination records or previous immunity testing or get current immunity testing. So the vast majority of individuals who were exposed were over the age of 30, and the vast majority of them were vaccinated or had other evidence of immunity. There were 115 total exposures, of which nearly half of those were healthcare workers in some capacity or another. And so the vast majority of exposures took place in the emergency department as opposed to the hotel. As you can imagine, there's a lot more people in a hospital at any given time than there are in common areas in a hotel. I can say that as of an hour ago, we located the 115th individual. So we have actually managed to contact trace every single individual that we're aware of that was potentially exposed, and are waiting for the results of their testing to come back at this point. But we have, that is our latest update, is we have identified every single person who can be identified as having been in contact or potential contact with our reference case.
This June 1st, Humboldt County children will set up a lemonade stand for Lemonade Day. Lemonade Day helps children learn to set goals, make plans, create budgets, and more. Many participants also donate part of their earnings to local charities. This year, Humboldt has 35 stands from Rio Dale to McKinleyville. To find out where the stands are, when they'll be open, and most importantly, what they'll be serving, head to the map online or in the North Coast Journal. Here's my interview with Phil Zwerling and the ongoing effort to rename the city of Fort Bragg.
I did no research on the name. We visited on our honeymoon for the first time in 2015. We ran up and down several blocks looking at houses that were listed for sale, made an offer after 3 days on site, and then bought the home. So we were, in some ways, we were intelligent buyers. In some ways, we were not. We love our house. We love our community. You can't throw a rock here without hitting an artist. I'm a writer. I'm surrounded by writers, visual artists, poets. A neighbor who makes ceramics and sells them all around the country. So it's a very well-educated artistic community in part. And then I started thinking, well, where's the fort? And I went looking and, I just couldn't at first find it at all. And then I said, well, who's this guy? Braxton Bragg. He was a general in the Confederate Army. And I'm originally from New York. I've lived most of my life in the North. We don't have statues to Confederate generals. And then I looked a little further. He was not only a Confederate general, but he was an enslaver. He enslaved about over 100 men, women, and children on his sugar plantation in the state of Louisiana. So this didn't seem like something we should be associated with. And I had some pause. I'd lived in California before, in Los Angeles and Santa Barbara when I was going to school. And I did not understand until I began doing some research how large a population of Southern sympathizers were in this state at the time it joined the Union in 1850. And actually, many Black people were here as slaves at that time. Because when the Southerners came out for the gold rush in 1849, they brought their slaves with them. And one book I've read estimates that secessionist attitudes were found in about 30% of the population of adult male voters in the state of California in 1850. So what I've seen now is as you said, after the murder of George Floyd, there was a lot more of paying attention to monuments, statues, and names. And I had to get involved, and many other people got involved. And I'll have to say, in changing the name here, that it's really nothing new. The fort was founded in 1857, and it was meant to police the Mendocino Indian Reservation. But as soon as the Civil War broke out, other officers wrote to the War Department saying, we got to change the name of this place. You can't have a fort in a Union state that's named for a Confederate. And even I'll say the commander in Humboldt, who was named Francis Lippett in 1862, wrote to the War Department, said, there's a fort to my south named for a Confederate general. Let's change that. And I can only presume that the War Department had better things to do in the midst of the Civil War, and the name was not changed. But 1864, the fort was decommissioned. The indigenous people who had been imprisoned here on the Mendocino Indian Reservation were then marched over the hill out to Round Valley. And the land, all the seacoast was opened up to white settlement. And so the fort was gone in 1864, but when the town was incorporated in 1889, they could have chosen any name in the world. They incorporated under the name Fort Bragg. So this has been an issue for 160 years, and I think I think it's interesting how few people know the history, and yet they're somehow so attached to the name. And I've talked to many graduates of Fort Bragg High School, and they tell me they never studied Braxton. They didn't know who this person was. They didn't know about the Mendocino Indian Reservation. And I guess that makes the project even more important because it's an historical project. And our group is incorporated as an educational nonprofit. And we believe that through education, talking to people, having speakers, that we will eventually change the name of this city.
Now, I noticed I had first heard about this a few years ago. There was some articles that were written, and the governor even said it's the right move at the time to change the name of the town. And I knew that there was a vote coming up, and I never saw what happened with that. Can you give me a little bit of the history of this movement and where it's been in terms of the city's residents and what the reaction has been like from most of the folks, and how many, like what percentage would you estimate are on your side of the issue?
In 2015, the Legislative Black Caucus here in California, assembly people and senators, wrote a letter to our city council asking them to change the name. The city council, the mayor said, no, we're not doing it. They never voted. Nobody has ever voted on this issue over these 160 years. After the murder of George Floyd, there was much more interest. People went to the city council, and they have the power to change the name. And the city council, in a very political move, sidestepped the issue and said, we'll appoint a citizens commission. And then just to make sure that there could be no decision, they put equal numbers of people in favor of the name change and people opposed to the name change on this commission. And so, of course, the commission reported back after a year and a half that they were deadlocked on the issue. So the only way the name is going to change now is a vote of all of the residents of this city. We're a population just a tad under 7,000 people in the city of Fort Bragg, and 3,900 registered voters. And they're the ones who eventually, this will go. It'll take an initiative campaign to put this on the ballot, and then these registered voters will get to vote. A couple of years ago, I would have estimated that maybe it was 60-40 against the name change. I think it's changed since then. I think it may be very close to 50-50. But we don't want to have a vote where it's the question is decided by 1, 2, 3 votes. We would, because people have to feel good about the change. And I think it can be a very positive change for the town, both morally in terms of publicity and economically. So I think we'll be looking at a vote in, 2-4 years. And then I'm hoping it's going to be at least 60-40 for the name change.
Is that something that your organization is spearheading? I mean, would you say that you're going to be organizing that initiative effort, or is that something someone else might take up?
What we're specifically incorporated as an educational nonprofit, and so we can engage in electoral politics. So when I think we have a feeling that the majority of the people locally are in favor of a name change, we'll probably go out of business. And it'll be time for another organization that's not tax exempt, that is more political than educational, to pick up the gauntlet and continue.
Since you are a relatively recent arrival to Fort Bragg within the last 10 years, has there been accusations of carpetbagging or any kind of stuff like that? And how do you answer that?
You can imagine every accusation in the world, and I just want to put this in perspective. Down in Fresno County, they used to have the name, and it's a racial slur on indigenous women, that it was Squaw Valley. The Bureau of Geographic Names just changed that to Yakuts Valley, named for one of the tribes there. So what happened? The Board of Supervisors sued against the name change. That didn't work. The Board of Supervisors put the issue on the ballot and lost. Right now, down in Kelseyville, a town in Lake County named for one of the most reprehensible rapists and murderers of indigenous people, Andrew Kelsey, they're petitioning the Bureau of Geographic Names to change the name of their town. We're incorporated. Unlike those unincorporated areas, we're incorporated, so we need a vote. But I bring that up because the arguments against the name change are exactly the same names, exactly the same arguments in every place. It's always been this way. We're not really honoring this person. It's just a tradition. The newcomers are here. Why did they come here if they don't like the name? They should just leave. And quote, my people have been here for 1, 2, 3 generations. So yes, we hear all of that. And it links up with the cultural divide across the country. And I really do, on some level, empathize with those who are opposed to the name change, because the city, the mill used to be a mill town, and the mill is gone. It used to be a fishing town, and the fish are gone. So it's a very tough place for working class people to live. And people who've been here for multi-generations, they see their kids leaving town because there aren't jobs here. So I understand that now this is one more thing to say these woke elitists are here to take our town away from us. And I'm hoping that through discussion, they're going to understand that we also love this town, and that it's going to be a better place when the name changes, and that the name is not the most important thing about this town. Now, I'll also say that while I'm a relative newcomer, many of the people, and we have 900 people on our mailing list, many of those people are themselves born and bred here, graduates of Fort Bragg High who were in favor of the name change. So it's moving across generations and backgrounds to support the change.
I think we should point out that Fort Bragg, the actual fort, has since been renamed.
Yes.
It's Fort
Liberty.
Fort Liberty, yes, which I think is appropriate given the history. So this is not something that only the residents or some residents of Fort Bragg are thinking about. It's been an issue that's gone on for some time. If not Fort Bragg, then what? What name would you like to see in its place, or is that something that you would leave up to residents to decide once it's been decided that a change is necessary?
No, at some point, I think you can't beat something with nothing. At some point, we're going to have to, through discussion, consensus, propose another name, and in a single ballot, say, let's change the name of Fort Bragg to. We're not sure yet, and I want to direct people to our website at change-our-name-Fort-Bragg.com, because we do have one page where people can suggest names, and we've had many suggestions. Also, people at the website can find lots of information about the history of this area, and also the recorded talks of past speakers that we've had here. So I think the main question we have to decide, and we're talking to indigenous people, is whether they would like to have their language be applied to this area. And I think if they agree, if they can agree on a name, that's the direction we would go. But otherwise, we'll just keep. We're still looking for a name.
What tribe would be operative in this case?
Well, there are several, and of course that's such a sad history, because
Sure.
when people say, "Oh, we're old timers and you're newcomers," well, who are the real old timers? Those are the Pomo and the coastal Yuki, who lived here for literally thousands of years. They're the real old timers, and they're joining us. Many of them joining us in this effort to rename the town. But it involves, for example, the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo, the Round Valley Band, the Coyote Valley Band, the Point Arena Valley Band. They were here for millennia, and now indigenous people make up about 3% of the population here. And that's not by choice. They were removed by force. So I think those are the old timers, those are the elders, those are the people that really have to have a voice and a seat at the table in this discussion.
Why do you think? I mean, obviously, you've studied history, you write about history, and you're a creative writer, so you're used to, writing powerful copy and convincing people of your arguments. What was the value of going back and changing the name? If the most people within the town don't necessarily associate the term Fort Bragg with this guy, can you explain for us why remnants like that can still damage us culturally generations on, even though the awareness of what those crimes were may have gone to bed?
I think there are it's important on perhaps three different levels. One is to raise the consciousness of the history, because the history is horrible. The Pomo lived here, the Yuki lived here. They were forced onto the Mendocino Indian Reservation in 1856. The fort was established, in a sense, as the gendarme at the concentration camp. They were not allowed to fish. They were not allowed to hunt. The effort was made to turn them into farmers. That was one idea, but really they were kept as contract labor to the mills, to the lumber mills. So people ought to know this. Also, people ought to make the connection that the lumber is gone, the fish are gone, because we depleted these resources in an outburst of greed that the indigenous people before us never did. That's one. Two is that when we say change the name, it's really shorthand for many things. It includes land back to indigenous people. This is something that's happening across the country. It's happening here. Blues Beach, just north of the city, has been returned by the legislature to the Pomo people. And there are other portions of the land down on the headlands that could be returned to them. Secondly, I think it's time for a memorial to the victims of the Indian reservation here. I think it's time for a cultural center. I think it's time to incorporate much better education in our public schools locally. So when we say change the name, it's connected to a multiple different things. And then the third layer, and it's something I knew nothing about, and people are going to have to bear with me as I explain it, and they're going to have to think about this, is that the name itself induces generational trauma. I have seen indigenous people cry because when they hear the name fort, they associate it with the fort in 1860, where some of their relatives starved to death. The indigenous people there, their rations from the government was grain watered down with sawdust, where they were served rotten meat, where people starved. So when they come here, I mean, that's one reason we don't have more indigenous people here. There's that generational trauma of knowing that this is where their relatives died. And for Black people. And this is the reason that Fort Bragg, North Carolina changed its name, and 9 other Army bases across the country changed their names, was because of the trauma to people of color who were in the armed services. To think of these were all bases throughout below the Mason-Dixon line named for Confederate generals. And the Congress changed those names on the basis of morale for the armed services. So I have seen African Americans come here and feel insulted. What does it mean to name your town for a Confederate? Well, people will tell you, oh, he was a hero in the Mexican-American War, and he didn't own slaves. His wife owned slaves. But when you choose not to change the name, then you're insulting people. It's not the name, but it's clinging to the name. When you've been asked to change it, when you've been educated about what it means, when the Black Caucus has asked you to change it, and you refuse, then you're making a choice all over again. Not the choice you made in 1889, but the choice you're making in 2024 to continue to insult people. And that's kind of the whole ball of wax involved in the name change.
If there are people who are passionate and agree with you, what's the best way for them to get involved? And you mentioned your website. Should they go there if they were interested in donating to your cause? How would you like to see that move forward for folks? We have 2 minutes left, just so you know.
Thank you. I would say that while it's true that only residents can vote, everybody can have an opinion. Everybody can be part of this movement if they'd like to be. The first step is to educate ourselves, and it's a process we're all going through, and to go to change-our-name-Fort-Bragg.com, find lots of material there. And there are also ways to donate there. We have our post office box to accept snail mail donations, and we have a little button for GoFundMe so that they can make a donation immediately. All of those donations are tax deductible, and all of them will be used for this educational campaign. And we'd like people to get involved. We'd like their email addresses so we can send them our monthly newsletter and invite them to events here locally.
For the glory. This weekend, make sure to tune in to Keep TV to catch all the ups and downs of this year's Kinetic Grand Championship. Saturday, Sunday, and Monday from 10 a.m. to noon on Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon on Sunday, and 1 to 3 on Monday. We're going to be out there, we're going to get dirty, we're going to get great footage, and we're going to bring you guys along. So please, watch what we bring and you'll enjoy it, I promise. Stay tuned, stay informed.